Just to give you an idea of what we're doing at Fathom, the platform we're developing allows app developers to integrate our SDK, which automates the collection of data in their apps and sends it into our platform, which then converts that, aggregates that into actionable insight, which can then be purchased for Fathom tokens by data consumers. And whenever some of this data is purchased, we take those tokens and we distribute royalties from them back to the developers proportional to the data that they contributed. So what I'm going to talk about today is just give you an overview of how this platform works, how it's put together, and the economy that underpins it. So just to give you some background, Gasworks was the original name of the company. We were founded about 2 years ago now, out of the games industry with the original intention of automating live ops and data science for games. So we began full-time development in September of 2016. And a few months later, at the start of the new year, we had our first functional prototype and got into our first live product. We then started talking to VCs to get some venture funding in. And in the course of those conversations, we started getting asked about cryptocurrencies. And that's when we hit upon the idea we could actually pay people for their data and set up an economy around it. So we moved into that space and we've been developing in that vein ever since. That brings us to today. We've got four live apps currently using the platform without the token implemented just yet. We've got 5 more in development, hopefully releasing before too long. And we currently have full support for iOS, Android, JavaScript, PC, and the Unity and Unreal gaming engines. So what happens next? Well, we're building up to a pre-sale, hopefully in March, with a token sale happening shortly after that. And after that, we'll then hopefully launch the full platform in early 2019. Traditional app is created by a development team, which will then be managed once it's live by a product manager. So in the old model, the product manager, they'd release the app, and then they'd forget about it. They'd move on to the next product. Maybe they do one update every now and again. But in the modern world, most apps are service-based, so they can require continual monitoring, continual updates, continual management. So in order for the product manager to be able to give their instructions and change the live app, they need a server engineer to build the facilities for those configurations, those new instructions to get down to the app. And they also need to know how the app's behaving, how it's performing, so you need a data scientist to take the data from the app and turn it into something that you can actually assess, monitor user behavior, monitor product performance. So that creates these big 3 dependencies. First of which, data scientists are very expensive, very scarce, and very complicated skill set. And while there are various middleware solutions out there to help data scientists, none of them solve the dependency. They're helping a data scientist do their job, but if you can't find and employ a data scientist in the first place, then you're out of luck. And the same problem exists with server engineers. They're very scarce, very expensive skill sets. And while there are various facilities out there to help them do their jobs, if you don't have access to that skill set in the first place, you're swimming upstream. And then the product manager in the center, now they're the most expensive of the lot. And they're often from non-technical backgrounds. So they do need these other more technically minded disciplines around them to be able to operate. And there is currently no real product management solution out there to help product managers do their job. There's various facilities from the companies on either side, but they've all moved sideways into that space. It's not really fulfilling what product managers need. And that creates a number of problems. So the first one we've spoken about is resource. Even building a team of these 3 disciplines is quite challenging for a lot of app studios. Then you need to be able to collect the right data to monitor the performance. You need to collect enough of that data to be able to actually properly constrain the performance and understand it. Once you've got that data, you need to put it in context, so you need to know what good looks like. If you release an app and its day 1 retention is 35%, well, if that's a game or a social media platform, that's absolutely terrible. But if it's an e-commerce platform, then you're okay. That's pretty much fine. So you need that context to know where the actual problems are, where the opportunities are. Then foresight. Once you've actually been able to decide how the app's performing, you need to know what to do about it. So you need to know what the potential impact of your decisions might be. And then, once you've actually made the decision, actually enacting that decision, every day you wait, every day in the update cycle, you're losing the chance to capitalize on that opportunity or to fix that problem. And all of these problems grow out of one central problem, which is reinvention. There's a huge amount of wasted work that goes on in this space, whereby various different things are done over and over again. It's the same thing at different companies. So reinvention of process is one example of this. So choosing when to do a sale, choosing when to schedule a live event, balancing gameplay or the experience of an app. These are all things that are done over and over again, exactly the same process being built and executed separately at different app studios across the world. And the same applies in analytics, the same calculation of DAU, exactly the same script. It must have been written thousands of times over and executed thousands of times over when there's no need for that to happen. And of course, at the very base level, you've got reinvention of functionality, where exactly the same systems are implemented over and over again from scratch by studios around the world. So let's just start with the reinvention of functionality and break that down what it actually is. Well, there's two sides to it. There's general functionality, where you've got live configuration. So if you're going to be changing an app live, you need some way of configuring it. You need some way of managing that configuration once you've actually built it. And you need some way of targeting that experience to the end user so you can actually make the app user-specific. Then you need to generate telemetry, you need to collect raw data from the app, and then you need to reduce it live. So then you've got the bespoke functionality, depending on what system you're trying to implement. So you need a custom configuration that manages the end-user tailoring, the live ops management, and the live configuration, and you need some sort of custom data handling to do that data reductions for whatever that particular method is. And then you actually need to deliver the specifics of that process. So just to break down the sort of things we're talking about here, actually, no, first. So we built the Fathom SDK to solve the general side of the problem, which makes all apps live ops ready, which fulfills the following four things. They can all be reconfigured while live. They can all tailor their experience to individual users. They can all have their live operations remotely managed and, most importantly, automated. And they automatically collect and reduce all of their own analytics data. And this is at a lower level than anything else that's currently on the market. So what that actually means for the individual things at the side is what we call the Fathom modules, which are the individual ways of delivering each of the solutions that we can create on this platform. So just to take one, IAPs, in a traditional in-app purchase system, here's the processes you've got to do to implement it with a traditional middleware service background. So first you've got to integrate it with all the platforms. Then you've got to handle restore purchases and other legal requirements to doing purchases in the actual app. Then you need to integrate with whatever live config system you've got. You've got to design how you're going to configure each IAP, and then you've got to actually set up those configurations. You've then got to set up a server to handle receipt verification to stop your purchasing getting hacked. You've then got to design what data you want to collect it and reduce it. And finally, you've got to hook it into the UI. So overall, that's about 5 weeks of work to implement your IAP system. And what generally happens is that developers don't spend that much time. They'll end up cutting corners and trying to do these things after the fact. But let's see what happens when we add in the Fathom SDK. That's already taking out three of the biggest things on that platform and automating them. So you no longer need to worry about the analytics reduction or the user targeting because that's built into our services. And the integration with live ops, well, you get that for free with the SDK. Then with the actual module, you get rid of most of the rest. So the module itself, it wraps all of the platforms. It has its own configuration for the IAPs that you can extend. And it does all the server-side verification and all of the microservices required to operate the underlying functionality. And at the very base of it, it knows exactly what data it needs to collect to monitor the IAP, so it does all of that automatically. So what you're left with at the end of that is 3 steps, which I'll just show you how they work here in the actual in a real implementation. So one line to initialize the Fathom SDK and to start it syncing with the live configuration that you've defined online, which is here for an IAP. So all you need is the IAP ID, and if you want to add anything else to that, to expand that definition as much as you want, you can add new properties to that entity that gets sent down. And then you hook it up to the purchasing to the UI, which again is another one line of code. So that, just as an example of how this platform can very, very easily simplify the production of these apps and how it then slots in to the app process and replaces the server engineer. So all of that functionality is tied into the module. Once you implement it into the app, you no longer have that dependency, and the module itself is now collecting the data and sending that up to the server. So what we've done here, we've solved the reinvention of functionality problem, and we've gone a long way to solving reinvention overall. If we look at all the top-level problems, well, collection, we've solved that entirely because the modules are collecting all of their own data. We've solved a bit of the resource problem because we've removed that dependency on the server engineer. And we've solved a lot of the immediacy problem because you can live configure all of the modules so you can go online, make those changes, and they're immediately enacted in the app. So let's look at the next bit, which is the data scientist side. So let's break down what's actually happening. So all of these modules, exactly the same as sending data up. And in the traditional model, the data scientist writes an analysis script that then takes that data and converts it into insight that can then get used by the product manager to make their decisions. But all of these modules are now producing identical data regardless of what app they're implemented in. So we can add one script that analyzes all of them and benefits from the data from all of the apps that are implementing exactly the same functionality, and that creates a hell of a lot more insight that we can then pass up to the product managers. So just to take you through quickly how that works, our data pipeline is entirely semantic, so all of our analyses can be described in data. So this is our daily active users script. So you've got a bit at the top, which is just general information for labeling what it does. Then you've got the calculation instructions that I'll dive into in a second. And then you've got any number of additional definitions that tell you how to use that data once it's been collected. And that can be extended, so you can add any number of other things there. The one example here we've got is how to visualize this particular channel of data in our dashboards. So the other thing as well I'll mention is that all of this is hugely more efficient than other pipelines out there because nothing is calculated twice. So as an example, here's our new users script, which is identical to the daily active user script. It just inherits directly, and the only difference is that it only does that calculation when the user in question is in their first day of play. So just to break down what's going on here, each of these references in the creation references what we call a dimension, which is analogous to what you might find on the X or Y axis of a chart, which it has its own instructions of how the pipeline calculates that. And that enables nothing to be calculated more than once. So just to break it down, actually how this works. So as the data flows in to our pipeline, the endpoint is looking for the timestamp generated record, which it then knows it needs to apply a certain recipe to, which is just a stock function, to create the actual dimension. And because all of this is happening in real time and all defined previously in data, then everything can get calculated at the same time as efficiently as possible. So yeah, all of these channels can be populated in real time directly with data from any number of different apps, all processing at the same time. So there's no wastage of I/O, nothing being read more than once, and everything is being calculated as quickly as it can. So that allows us to calculate the very top level. What we can do then is write more definitions that tell the pipeline how to combine those things once they've been calculated. So we can take very simple things like sessions and daily active users and calculate, just as a simple example, sessions per daily active user. But we can also combine it to calculate more complex things like retention or lifetime value, and then we can combine those to do really, really complicated analytical techniques like user profiling, projecting the future performance of the app, even predictive analytics. So what that does, if we move that back in, is that then replaces the data scientist, so the channel itself can generate any insight that the product manager needs to be able to do their job. So if we go, and because everyone is contributing data, whenever that data gets used by the pipeline, it's also generating a revenue for those people contributing data because they're getting paid in tokens when anyone else uses that data as well. So we solved the reinvention of analysis problem, gone a bit more to solving reinvention overall. Resource problem is solved a little bit more. We've solved the volume problem because developers can now use everyone else's data. They don't have to worry about collecting enough data themselves. The context problem is solved as well because everyone else, all of the data is now identical. So you don't need to worry about comparing to anyone else's performance because you know their performance is applicable. And we've gone some way towards solving the foresight problem as well because you can benefit from the experiences of other apps and other decisions they've enacted. So that leaves us with one final dependency on the product manager. So let's just look at what the product manager is actually involved in this cycle. Is they have a number of insights coming at them from the channels, and they're using that to inform decisions and reconfigure the various modules they've implemented. So sometimes the channels aren't going to be enough to give them the insight that they need. So an independent data scientist can create what's called an insight report, which is a standardized means of processing the data and delivering some stock insight that can be readily applied to any data source within the larger ecosystem. But that doesn't actually solve the larger problem of doing the product manager's job. However, all the data that's coming in is standardized, and all of the configurations that are going out are also standardized. So all the product manager is doing is enacting a rote script every single time. So we can just replace them entirely with an AI agent that knows what queries to make of the underlying data, knows what configurations to react to as a result, and can automate that entire process. So what we have at the end of this is a functionality where the channels are providing insights to the agents that can automatically decide how to reconfigure the modules to achieve the ends that the development team want. And the modules generate the data that goes into the channels, and so we've automated the entire loop of live operations. So just to show you back in the context of the overall diagram, we've now got a complete loop where everything in the center of that diagram is operating on its own. So that's solved the reinvention of process because all of those things can be managed by AI. Reinvention overall is solved. We've also solved the rest of the resource problem because none of those dependencies need to exist anymore. The foresight problem is solved because the agents themselves can benefit from their own foresight. And the immediacy problem is solved because the agents will enact the decisions as soon as the data exists to make that decision. So just to break this down overall, and explain the economy we've created, anyone can create a module. As long as it obeys the standardization, anyone can create a module and add it to the system and get paid in Fathom tokens from a share of the return that module generates within the larger ecosystem. In the same way, anyone can create a channel and be rewarded with, again, a return of the query tokens that channel generates. Anyone can author an insight report and get paid in tokens according to based on commission, based on the queries they generate. And the same for the agents. Anyone who creates an agent, every time a user subscribes to that agent to help manage their live app, they get paid commission. And of course, at the base of it, anyone can contribute data. Provided they're contributing it in the standardized format, anyone can contribute data to this ecosystem and be paid in tokens. And that doesn't just apply to the developers, it applies to the end users as well. Anytime when we're using their data, we can recognize them and award them with tokens. So just to outline what happens next. So this larger process can be applied to any number of different industries. So we're starting with apps because and games because that's our background. But ultimately, all we're doing is standardizing a system whereby data is analyzed and applied. So that's what happens next. We've got the pre-sale coming up soon. We're looking to raise 300,000 for that budget. And after that, we're going to ICO with a current target of 5 million with a hard cap of 20. Anyone who wants to know more about that or anything, drop me an email or you can join a Telegram group. And we do still have our beta program running at the moment, so anyone who wants to try some of our starting modules or just find out anything more about that and get involved, drop us an email there as well. The standardization for each of the modules, whenever a module is created, the standardization is locked in for that particular module, but it is fully expandable. So for the IAP module, for example, the events are built into the software development kit in the app. So we define when we build that module where the data gets collected and what data gets sent up. For the key data for that module, that has to be hard coded in. But for other data, so for example, the country in which the user is currently playing, that exists independently of the module. So we have a system in place that allows that to be reconfigured live as well. As for how the configuration is defined, without going into too much detail about how that works, every single module is governed by a set of what we call entities, which is essentially a set of properties which are at a base level key value pairs, but a little bit more complicated than that because they carry a lot of functionality with them. So I'm happy to go into more detail about this afterwards. I'm just trying I'm trying to stop myself diving too far into it. And so we can bake in the very basic configuration that's required to make that module work. And then should an agent need to be able to configure extra things, they can have that in their requirements. So when you subscribe to that agent, they can add more properties to that module to govern how it works in the actual app.
So the question is, can you fix the app market? And in particular, think about this problem. We had a talk here at UCL by Rushdiet, the security guru, a few years ago, and he told us there is a law about the apps. It's like the software industry. No matter how they piss you off, you're not going to switch. So how can you tackle this problem?
We're hopeful with this system that we can create a way in which every system only needs to be built once. So if someone builds an IAP system, everyone else can just integrate that in our purchase system. And so every single developer only needs to worry about developing the USP of their app. They only need to worry about doing the things that makes their app unique. And they can rely on the large decentralized catalog of modules and various other components in order to deliver that experience as effectively as possible. And that then converts the whole industry to one where it's more collaborative in terms of optimizing those modules and building the larger functionality that helps them be as powerful as they can be. What was the second part of the question again?
Yes, so it's about the switching costs.
Yes.
And the fact that software companies take piss of their customers.
So hopefully this will, because every module, every channel, every agent will have a longer longevity than any one individual app and be continually maintained and used. It will individually be able to exist independently of an app. Because you'll have an agent operating a lot of the core functionality, that should hopefully make it more reliable over time. In terms of the switching cost for users, therefore, they might not need to switch because existing developers should just be able to slot these modules in as and when they need them. But from a larger scale side of things, you'd be able to get a much more reliable service provided through these standardized components, because they would carry them a lot of legacy and track record of having operated and worked with, in theory, continually people who are profiting from their continual use, therefore being incentivized to keep them up to date, keep them working, and keep them work in the best possible fashion they can be.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thanks very much.
Any more questions?